Snow White, the one who started it all, as the first full-length animated feature from Disney, and while the characters aren't as developed as modern animated films, you can't ignore what it inspired. It showed audiences that you can be emotionally connected to a character who is, at the end of the day, a drawing. So it's no surprise that for the beginning of the series of Once Upon a Time, a lot was focused on the Snow White story. But as you'd imagined, it was very different. So let's start with the fairest one of all, the Princess Snow White, who was born in a kingdom and realm known as the Enchanted Forest to her father, King Leopold, and Queen Eva. Her childhood was as sweet and innocent as one might hope, as her mother teaches her that everyone deserves love, kindness, and respect. However, on her 10th birthday, Snow White's mother falls ill. In a desperate need, the little princess searches for the blue fairy who she believes could help. The instruction is to wish upon a blue star, but she finds the blue fairy anyway in the woods. The only thing that she can offer is a candle, which can save one person's life in exchange for another. Believing this is dark magic, Snow White refuses. She later confesses what happened to her mother, but her mother expresses how proud she is of her, as she has displayed strength and goodness. After the funeral, Snow White joins her father on his travels. During this, she suddenly feels her horse has been spooked and gallops incredibly fast. She is holding on for dear life. She is saved by a woman called Regina, who turns out is hoping for a marriage proposal by King Leopold. He does after learning Regina had saved his daughter, but Snow White isn't too thrilled. Regina catches up to her as it turns out her mother, named Cora, wanted the proposal, not her. Instead, she is in love with a stable boy named Daniel and they plan to elope, but Snow White is sworn to secrecy. After she is confronted by Cora, who states that she only wants happiness for her daughter, Snow White is manipulated into telling, looking back on the feelings she felt losing her own mother. A few days later, she sees Regina trying on a wedding dress and tells her that she did tell Cora the truth. Regina tells her that it didn't matter, as Daniel had run away and left her, and so she is glad to be marrying the king. However, of course, Snow White is oblivious to Regina's true feelings towards her. Over the years, Snow White learns how to become a great ruler and improves her riding skills as well as learning archery. Now grown up, Snow White still has her strong connection with her father and is introduced to his new friend, a genie from Agrabah. Her father tells him that his daughter is the fairest one of all from her goodness and many achievements. One morning, the king is discovered dead in his bedchambers, but strangely, the guards find a viper whose usual habitat is Agrabah. The genie is highly suspected but has gone missing. Now mourning the loss of her father, Snow White only has the parent figure of her stepmother, Regina, but she has grown suspicious of the new queen. One day in the forest, she is nearly attacked by a huntsman and learns his orders were from the queen. However, she escapes, writes a letter to her stepmother, and returns it to the huntsman, explaining that she is ready to die. Struck by her beauty and mostly her kindness, the huntsman tells her to run away and gives her a whistle in case she is in ever need of help. So now Snow White is on the run, where many wanted signs bear her name. During this time, she comes across many characters, but we'll save them for their own profiles. But one we can't miss out is a man named David, but she believes the nickname Prince Charming suits him best. Although their first meeting wouldn't be quite as romantic as you think. Over time, Snow White gains her skill of stealing valuables from carriages, and one of them happens to belong to David. She manages to outrun him and sell his jewels to a band of trolls. However, this man catches her and Annette tells her he knows she's the Princess Snow White, but he won't tell the Queen if his engagement ring is returned. This gives her no other option but to return to where she sold it, at Troll's Bridge. Unfortunately, David is caught by the trolls when bargaining failed. Snow White uses some fairy dust she gained a while ago, and the trolls transform into bugs. The two escape and part their separate ways, with David's ring still intact. During her time in hiding, she overhears that David is to marry a Princess Abigail. She wishes she could forget about him, as she grows feelings towards him and thus seeks out a warlock known as Rumpelstiltskin. He gives her a potion that will solve her problems, and she was close to drinking it but she finds a letter from David that he truly cares for her and wants her to come to his castle. Unfortunately, she is caught sneaking in and thrown in the dungeons, where she meets a dwarf named Grumpy. Another dwarf named Stealthy, who breaks the two out, and they separate, finding different ways out. Stealthy is killed, but Snow White saves Grumpy, but is caught and taken to the King George. He agrees to let her go if she tells David that she doesn't love him, otherwise he will kill him. She does as he requests and leaves broken-hearted, but Grumpy, along with 6 other dwarfs, decide to take her in to live at their cottage. After some time, Grumpy receives news that David has cancelled his engagement, but he finds that Snow White has drank the potion. Not only does the potion forget her Prince Charming, but she shows no love or respect toward anyone. With this newfound anger, she intends on finally killing her stepmother, the Queen. In the woods, David finds her and tries to break the spell by true love's kiss, but it doesn't work. Snow finds the road where the Queen's carriage is scheduled to pass by and aims her bow and arrow. When she shoots, David gets in the way and takes the hit. He tells her he would rather die than see her taken over by darkness. She ends up kissing him, and finally the spell is broken. Just as they are finally together, however, David is kidnapped by King George's soldiers. She returns to the dwarf's cottage and they all prepare to save her Prince Charming. The ambush at the castle goes swimmingly until Snow White reaches the dungeons. Instead of seeing David in a cell, she sees him in a mirror, which can only mean one thing. He is a prisoner of her stepmother, the evil Queen. She agrees to meet her alone at the place where it all began, Regina's old home. At the place, Snow sees a grave bearing Daniel's name, the stable boy Regina was in love with. The evil Queen reveals that Cora killed him because Snow White told her. To make peace between them, the evil Queen offers her to take a bite out of a poison apple, or else David will be executed. With no other option, Snow White takes a bite and falls into a sleeping curse. The dwarves rest her body in a glass coffin, where David finally finds her and gives her true love's kiss that wakes her up. Snow White builds a rebellion against the evil Queen and take back the throne, so now war has begun. Eventually, King George's army is defeated and the evil Queen is captured and sentenced to death. However, on the day of the execution, Snow White refuses and decides to banish her stepmother instead, but warns her if she returns, then she will die. Finally home, and with her Prince Charming, they can at last hold a wedding, but the evil Queen bursts in during the ceremony and announces that she is planning a dark curse that will destroy everyone's happiness. Charming tries to encourage her to be happy and still have their honeymoon. Snow White decides to go to her old summer palace. However, she wants to go there because she hears of a creature known as Medusa, who can turn someone to stone when making eye contact. David catches her, trying to cut off her head, and he ends up turning to stone. Snow White tries using a reflective shield to make Medusa look at herself, to where she is destroyed and David returns to normal. She expresses how she hates trying to constantly fight with her stepmother, and she decides she wants to continue her life and try for a baby. They are both worried about whether their child will be good or bad, so they find a unicorn to touch its horn to see the future. Both have very polar opposite visions. Completely stuck on what to do, they seek out a sorcerer's apprentice, especially since they're aware Maleficent has laid an egg. He tells her the only way to remove any darkness from their unborn child is for another to take it all, therefore being fully consumed by darkness. Snow and Charming seriously consider Maleficent's baby, as she is the mistress of all evil. After escaping the dragon with the egg and promises to return it, the apprentice, however, informs them that too much darkness would bring danger to the kingdom, so it must travel to another realm. Snow tries to save the baby, but it's too late. With this in her guilt and the threat of the evil Queen, Snow White is desperate and visits Rumpelstiltskin, who has been arrested to get answers. He explains the curse will happen, but her unborn daughter will become the saviour and save everyone. With this in mind, Snow explains to a war council, including Charming, the Seven Dwarfs, Red Riding Hood, Granny, Pinocchio, Geppetto, Jiminy Cricket, and the Blue Fairy. They are aware that the dark curse will remove everyone's memory and they'll forget who they are. The Blue Fairy suggests for Geppetto to carve a wardrobe made from an enchanted tree that can transport someone to this new world, in this case, Snow White's daughter. The curse is on its way and Snow White gives birth. Charming takes the baby to the wardrobe, but gets wounded when he hides her. Snow stays close to her husband with one last look at the evil queen, her stepmother, before the curse finally engulfs them. She has certainly grown through a lot, this princess, but has always tried to do the best thing possible. There are of course times she's failed, but she's always tried to find the goodness in people, even if it means discovering it too late. We know she'll still be full of goodness and kindness in our new world, but will she find the strength to become a true leader again?